Chapter 4 Potent Potables.
RainbowDash?
Trixie asked, looking the Pegasus mare over. RainbowDash's own eyes copied the movements as she took in Trixie's appearance.
Yeah?
The Pegasus answered.
Who are you supposed to be?
She looked between Trixie and Ditsy-Do.
Oh, and which one of you scared Fluttershy?
Ditsy-Do waved her hoof a little.
Didn't mean to,
the gray-coated Pegasus apologized.
Is she okay?
RainbowDash stepped to one side, pointing into Fluttershy's home. It was decorated beautifully, adorned with all sorts of odds and ends that gave it a very homely, cozy appearance. However, a table and everything that had been on it were knocked over, along with a vase of flowers sitting near the stairs to the cottage's second floor.
Does it look like she's okay?
RainbowDash demanded.
Way to go, Derpy.
Ditsy-Do grimaced slightly at RainbowDash's accusation and name-calling. Trixie felt a surprising amount of furor rising in her chest over that.
Hey!
She exclaimed, stepping forward and placing her face right up in the Pegasus's own.
Leave Ditsy-Do alone!
The Cyan Pegasus's eyes widened a little at Trixie's words, as though they had jogged a memory for her. After several moments of staring, she shook her head, clearing it.
Who are you?
She demanded.
Trixie,
the unicorn introduced herself.
Representative Trixie of the Night Court of Luna. I'm also here as the Longest Night Festival Overseer, so I need to speak with Fluttershy about the music she volunteered to handle.
RainbowDash bristled a little at that, in a mixture of defensiveness and embarrassment.
She's doing just fine, the pony proclaimed.
All right, but I need to talk to her.
No.
No?
No,
RainbowDash repeated firmly.
Not now. Come back later.
The Pegasus made to close the door, but Trixie blinked, and each of its hinges were wrapped in a blue magical aura, holding the door firmly open.
Why?
Trixie demanded. RainbowDash stared.
What?
Why should I come back later? Trixie clarified. I'm here now, Fluttershy's here now, provided she hasn't run out the back door or something.
Hey, lay off of Fluttershy, you don't even know her.
True enough,
Trixie admitted, and she grinned.
But I do know that of the 4 ponies at this house, you're the only one who isn't supposed to be here.
She jabbed a hoof back at Ponyville.
You're the Weather Patrol manager, right? Your team is wondering where you've gone. They're practically threatening to quit.
RainbowDash grunted, pointing up to the sky.
If those lazy bums can't even handle a few cirrus clouds, then they shouldn't be calling themselves Pegasi.
Not those,
Trixie continued, pointing past Fluttershy's house and into the darkening skies over the Everfree.
That's a huge storm brewing over the Everfree, and Raindrops said that—
Raindrops?
RainbowDash asked, then threw her head back and laughed.
Raindrops worries about every little stray cumulus because of how slow a flyer she is, and no pony should be worrying about that Everfree storm. It's nothing I can't handle.
Trixie blinked.
By yourself?
Yeah,
RainbowDash proclaimed, as though the answer should have been obvious.
I'd love to see you try and back that up.
The Pegasus opened her mouth as though to claim that she would, and right now at that, but stopped halfway and grimaced.
Look, I'm weather manager and I know what I'm doing. If that storm becomes a problem, I'll deal with it. But right now, I can't leave Fluttershy hanging, so if you'll just go away and take Derpy here with you—
Trixie's eyes narrowed, and her horn glowed dangerously.
Don't say that again, she threatened.
RainbowDash grinned at how Trixie seemed to be taking the name worse than the pony it was directed at. She opened her mouth, but before she could say anything, Ditsy-Do interposed herself between the weather manager and the Night Court representative, taking turns to glare at each of them, eyes focused and wings spread wide.
Stop,
she said, her voice firm, like a mother scolding children who were misbehaving themselves.
Now.
Trixie glared past Ditsy-Do at RainbowDash, who matched her stare unflinchingly. Neither of them, however, made any move to continue their argument. After a few moments, the gray Pegasus turned to RainbowDash.
I've known Fluttershy since she moved here, she said, nearly as long as you, so I'm going to go see my friend.
RainbowDash shook her head, appearing to have genuine concern for the pony, who was even now cowering upstairs somewhere.
No, not right now. She's really nervous and—
RainbowDash, Get out of my way!
The other Pegasus didn't move for several moments, but the unflinching, unblinking stare of Ditsy Doo eventually wore her down. She backed away from the door, making enough room for the gray Pegasus to step into the cottage. Once inside, she folded her wings back against her sides and turned around to look at Trixie.
What did you want to ask, Fluttershy?
She asked.
Just how the music preparations were coming along,
Trixie answered, making a point of not looking at RainbowDash even peripherally.
Although now I'm kind of curious about how she could be friends with a stuck-up—
No! Ditsy Doo ordered with surprising firmness, jabbing a hoof at Trixie, suddenly enough to make the unicorn stumble backwards a few steps. After a few moments, she turned around and trotted away, heading upstairs, although she spared a final glance at the two other ponies. She didn't speak, but the glare's meaning was obvious. Play nice, or I will ground you for a month. Trixie wasn't certain why such a look had an effect on her, but it did. Silence lingered between the Pegasus and the unicorn that Ditsy Doo left behind for some time. Eventually, however, RainbowDash glanced to Trixie, looking her over again.
Nice hat, she intoned, smirking.
Nice dye job,
Trixie countered without hesitation. The Pegasus's grin widened as she ran a hoof through her mane.
It's not dyed, she proclaimed proudly. I'm all natural.
Trixie seethed but didn't rise to the bait as she chose to focus on the ground under her hooves and not the grin of triumph she knew was on RainbowDash's face. Instead, she ran through the mental list of things she hated about today. Previously, the Apple Clan had been topping that list, but RainbowDash had managed to shoot past all competition and settle into an easy first place. Yay. After an eternity of silence, the sound of hoofsteps from the floor above them signaled Ditsy Doo's return. The gray Pegasus trotted down the cottage stairs and up to Trixie, a sad look on her face, eyes once again having wandered apart.
Fluttershy isn't going to be able to do the music this year,
she said sadly.
RainbowDash here talked her into volunteering, but now she's too frightened of being in front of so many ponies. Rainbow has been trying to convince her not to be worried, but Fluttershy's mind seems made up.
RainbowDash grumbled under her breath as she sat back on her haunches, crossing her front hooves in front of her.
I bet I would have been able to if you hadn't frightened her.
She seems pretty determined,
Ditsy Doo said, then considered her words.
Relatively, anyway.
Trixie was wide-eyed, mouth hanging open slightly, and blinking only slowly as she took in what Ditsy Doo had said.
What?
She asked.
No, it's only 2 days to the festival. She said she'd handle the music, volunteered, filled out the paperwork.
Actually, that was mostly me, RainbowDash admitted.
Trixie's eyes somehow managed to open even wider as she turned her gaze slowly onto the cyan Pegasus, whose expression had changed to one of embarrassment.
I mean, you should hear her sing, and she's really good with animals, and I've even seen her arrange a bird chorus, and I suggested that she should volunteer and get her birds to help, and she said she'd love to, and I thought it was maybe a chance to get her to open up, but then she got cold hooves a few days ago.
Trixie's mouth opened and shut of its own accord a few times before words managed to come out.
I'm going upstairs,
she said, taking a step forward. Instantly, her path was blocked by a pair of Pegasi, wings spread defensively.
No,
Ditsy Doo said.
I don't think so,
RainbowDash added. Trixie looked between the two.
But it's the longest night,
Trixie exclaimed.
The halfway point of winter. And we don't have music arranged for when the princess raises the moon, and the catering is going to be awful, and there's the storm coming.
Are you still on about that?
RainbowDash asked.
And I'm gonna be blamed for all this,
Trixie exclaimed, stepping forward again, but only to get close to the two Pegasi as she looked between the two.
This was my big chance to show Luna that I can handle responsibility and everything is heading straight into the sun.
Well, deal,
RainbowDash said. Ditsy Doo rolled her eyes at RainbowDash's advice before turning back to Trixie.
I'm sorry,
she said.
I really am, but Fluttershy is just too delicate. Even if you convince her somehow, she'd probably freeze on stage on the longest night anyway.
RainbowDash shot Ditsy Doo a glare at that, but the gray Pegasus only shrugged, and after a moment RainbowDash sighed and nodded in confirmation. Trixie's head snapped between the two a few more times before she let out a low groan of frustration.
Fine,
she spat, turning around and stomping out the door, making a point of letting the anger she felt rise visibly to the surface, projecting the perfect image of a pony that no pony would want to be within 100 feet of if they could help it. As expected, Ditsy-Doo didn't follow her. Indeed, the two Pegasi soon closed the door of Fluttershy's cottage. Once it was shut, Trixie stopped her angry pace, eyes narrow as her horn glowed beneath her hair, casting a spell that was almost as familiar as her basic unicorn telekinesis. Her color and form seemed to simply bleed out of reality, becoming nothing more than an odd smudge on the air, and soon afterwards, not even that, as her invisibility spell wrapped itself firmly around her body, hat, and cape. A second, similarly familiar spell encircled each of her hooves. She pranced in place on the dirt path beneath her a few times to confirm that her silencing spell had taken effect, before making a beeline straight for Fluttershy's cottage. The closed door presented little deterrent, as it hadn't been locked by either Pegasus. Trixie opened, passed through, and closed it before any pony inside the house could notice. She saw RainbowDash in Fluttershy's kitchen brewing up tea, and helping herself to a rather ample cookie supply, while Ditsy-Doo wasn't in sight, probably having gone up to the second floor. Trixie grimaced as she began to climb the stairs, slowly and carefully despite the sound-dampening spell that extended in a 6-inch radius around each hoof. In just a few moments, she was upstairs and making her way down a hall and into a room with its door wide open, in which soft voices could be heard conversing.
"Okay, Fluttershy,"
Ditsy-Doo said as Trixie entered the room. Fluttershy's bedroom was decorated much like the rest of the house, dominated by a bed with a green, thick comforter. Laying on top of the bed was a yellow Pegasus with a pink, thick, long mane, staring intently at her own front hooves and seeming like she was trying to hide her face in it. Her cutie mark was a trio of pink butterflies. Sitting opposite her on the bed was Ditsy-Doo, both eyes focused forward.
"Oh, okay,"
Fluttershy stuttered. Her voice was amazingly soft. Trixie had to lean in to hear it.
"Yeah,"
Ditsy said, leaning forward cautiously and gently nuzzling the yellow Pegasus. She flinched initially, but after a moment leaned into the friendly sign of affection.
"It was really brave of you to even volunteer." "Oh, I don't know,"
Fluttershy intoned.
"It was RainbowDash's idea. I never would have been brave enough to even try without her, and I only did it because I never thought I'd ever actually get the position." "Well, you did,"
Ditsy-Doo said as she pulled away.
"It was a big step forward."
Fluttershy looked up at Ditsy-Doo, and Trixie took a step back. Her eyes. Fluttershy's large teal eyes were stained red from tears.
It doesn't feel like one,"
she said.
"Oh, and that Trixie sounded so mad. I've made such a mess of things. I never should have let RainbowDash talk me into even trying. But she seemed so sure that I could do it, and I didn't want to let her down, but now I have."
Trixie did not, by any stretch of the imagination, consider herself an affectionate pony. It nevertheless took every ounce of willpower she had to not leap atop the bed and give Fluttershy a warm, tight hug. She looked like she needed one. Then again, if she flinched from even a gentle nuzzle, she wasn't certain Fluttershy would be able to survive such an outright show of affection. The unicorn pony also wanted to let out an annoyed sigh, but practice at sneaking around held that in check as well. She had come up here with the intent of decloaking herself, where there was nothing Ditsy-Doo or RainbowDash could do to stop her from seeing Fluttershy and demanding the pony perform at the longest night festival. But what she'd seen in just a few seconds of observing Fluttershy made it painfully obvious that she was never going to be able to perform on stage, no matter what Trixie either threatened to do to her or offered to bribe her with. The blue unicorn instead turned around and made her way from Fluttershy's cottage back out into the waning winter day. "Trixie, I'm sick of apples," Luna said.
"Me too, Princess."
"Yes, but you see, Trixie, it was your job to make sure that catering went smoothly. Now, because of you, I'm going to destroy the Apple Trust and outlaw apples across Equestria. Any pony caught eating one will be hanged, drawn, and quarters."
"I'm cool with that,"
Trixie said, beginning to seek out an apple.
"But do you really want to go outside in this?"
Luna looked outside at the massive snow, rain, wind, thunder, lightning, ice, and acid storm that was even now destroying Ponyville. "I am an alicorn, I can deal," Luna remarked, opening the door to the town hall and trotting outside. Immediately she began melting and freezing and being flayed. Dramatic music probably should have been playing, but it was completely, notably absent. Great, Luna objected as her body was destroyed. This is the last time I invest any responsibility in you, Trixie.
I know.
There was a pause. As Luna was reduced to nothing more than a head, she raised one eyebrow and appraised the interior of the town hall with one remaining eye before it was destroyed. The decorations are quite lovely, though. Good job. Trixie snickered at her own morbid fantasy as she made her way through Ponyville's streets, looking for the building that would be serving as her home while she was living in the town. It wasn't particularly hard to find, being located near the center and bordering the cobblestone plaza that surrounded the town hall. It was a 2-story thatch-roofed house, distinguishable only from the other residents in Ponyville only because it was surrounded by a short iron fence, only about chest-high, and a small garden currently buried under the snow, as well as a hanging sign outside its front gate that read, "Residency of the Representative of the Night Court of Luna," the words printed over the equestrian coat of arms. After the hectic day of disappointment, shocks, and nearly being trapped outside at noon, she was severely hoping that the pantry of her new home was fully stocked or at least contained a decent supply of potent potables. She trotted inside with eyes half-lidded, finding the door unlocked and the house inside dark. She hung her hat on the stand just inside the door but kept her cape on. The house was probably cold, and she wanted to continue benefiting from the warming enchantment woven into her cape until she could get a fire going.
Ugh.
The unicorn groaned as she made her way through the door that, if she were designing this house, would contain the living room.
Where's the light? Gah!
Quite suddenly, someone had turned on the gas lights in the room she had wandered into, and Trixie found herself surrounded by ponies of every shape, hue, and tribe, all of whom took the opportunity to shout, "Surprise!" at the top of their lungs. Trixie all but leapt from her coat at the sight, and nearly stumbled to the floor as a certain vibrant pink pony was suddenly standing right in front of her.
"Surprise!"
the pony exclaimed.
"I'm Pinkie Pie, and I threw this party just for you. Were you surprised? Were you? Huh?"
Trixie stared at the wide grin, the manic look. It was, for some reason, far too easy to imagine this pony doing horrible things to her.
"You see, I saw you outside Rarity's, remember? You were all stars above, and I was all gasp, remember? You see, I never saw you before, and if I never saw you before, that means you're new, 'cause I know every pony, and I mean every pony in Ponyville, and if you're new, that means you hadn't met any pony yet, and I met a few ponies, actually," Trixie interrupted as she picked herself up and started looking for something that would destroy her liver in short order. Pinkie Pie didn't slow down or acknowledge the interruption and followed Trixie as she walked. "And if you haven't met any pony yet, you must not have any friends, and if you don't have any friends, then you must be lonely, and that made me so sad. And I had an idea, and that's why I went gasp, I'll just throw a great big ginormous super duper spectacular party and invite every pony in Ponyville. See? And now you have lots and lots of friends."
Trixie had found a table laden with glasses and bottles that contained vibrant warnings about their contents. Checking a few labels, she chose one with the largest number on it and began pouring it into the glass while turning to regard Pinkie Pie at the party. She chose one with the largest number on it and began pouring it into a glass while turning to regard Pinkie Pie and the party.
"Every pony in Ponyville."
Pinkie Pie's head bobbed up and down rapidly as Trixie finished pouring and took a swig of what she'd poured for herself. It burned pleasantly on the way down her throat.
"There's maybe 24 ponies here."
Pinkie didn't deflate at all from Trixie's remark.
"A party is still a party even if every pony doesn't show up," she exclaimed, bouncing happily in circles around Trixie. "Besides, I don't think your house could fit every pony, not that I wouldn't mind trying, and there's still plenty of ponies here."
She smiled as she dragged several into a group hug, which they went along with surprisingly easily. The mugs of something foaming held in their hooves may have had something to do with it. Trixie blinked a few times, remembering Lyra's advice about Pinkie Pie's parties. The pink pony was genuinely enthused and seemed intent on making this Trixie's best night ever. And she just had an awful day and could use an excuse to just forget it. Tomorrow might be worse, after all, what with having to find a new music venue on short notice, not to mention the meeting with Rarity.
Ugh.
The blue unicorn drained what remained of her drink in one fell swoop, and then began pouring herself a new glass. As she did, an old earth pony salute came to mind. "Eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die." Lyra and Bonbon passed through the front gate of the residency of the Night Court representative. with trepidation, especially given the volume of music that was coming out of it, and above that, on occasion, the voice of Pinkie Pie.
Do we have to?
Lyra asked as they stood outside the door. Lyra was once more in her wool cloak and Gatsby, while Bonbon was bedecked in a cloak and wide-brimmed hat of her own. With the sun having settled beyond the horizon, the night's temperature was plunging rapidly. A chill wind answered her question as it cut through their garments, driving both of the ponies inside quickly to get out of the cold.
So, what's Trixie like? Bonbon asked.
Kind of a jerk, Lyra admitted. But I think she's under a lot of stress.
Maybe this party will do her good then,
Bonbon observed as the two shucked their hats and cloaks, leaving them in a pile that had been formed near the front door. Several ponies had escaped from where the main party seemed to be going on, standing in the hallway. They politely greeted Bonbon and welcomed Lyra back from Canterlot.
But we have to be in the same house as Pinkie Pie,
Lyra objected.
Hush, she's easily my best customer,
Bonbon responded, gently knocking her flank against Lyra's own. The unicorn put on a suitably mollified-looking face as the two ponies approached the main room. Before they could enter, however, a certain blue unicorn in a purple cape came stumbling out, no fewer than 3 different glasses, each containing liquids of different color, grasped in her telekinetic aura. Lyra and Bonbon froze as Trixie's violet eyes looked in their direction. They were glazed over, at first, but came swiftly into focus as she saw Lyra.
Heartstrings!
She exclaimed. Something seemed off about her voice, and not simply the slur it had picked up from the concoctions held in each vessel she carried.
Y'all made it!
Y'all?
Lyra echoed as Trixie stumbled forward and gave Lyra a tight hug, which the mint green unicorn returned if only to increase her chances of it ending quickly. As it did, Trixie turned to regard Bonbon.
You!
Trixie exclaimed, then paused, eyes squinting a little bit as she stared at Bonbon.
I'm afraid I've not yet had the pleasure.
Lyra blinked a few times, realizing the problem with Trixie's voice. Her accent had changed, not quite the country drawl that was common to the rural parts of Equestria, but similar. The Canterlot lilt to her accent had completely disappeared, however. Lyra said.
Trixie?
Trixie?
The unicorn asked incredulously, looking insulted. She put a hoof to her chest.
I'm wounded. I thought we were on better terms, mon ami heartstrings. Je m'appelle Lulamoon.
Lyra's eyes grew larger than any plate found outside of the Griffin Kingdoms at that demand.
Lulamoon? She asked.
Oui.
Trixie drew Lyra into a deep hug again as Bonbon stared with a mixture of confusion and mirth.
I'm so glad you're here, heartstrings. Come on. You all have to see this.
She stumbled away and back into the main party room. Bonbon blinked a few times, then looked back to Lyra.
She seems very friendly,
the Earth Pony remarked.
I don't know what you were worried about.
Lyra was actually growing quite a bit beyond worry, as she and Bonbon made their way into the living room, where the music was loud and the ponies were dancing, or recovering from long dancing sections, or just talking to each other. A blue blur moved between them all, making sure that neither glass nor mug remained empty for very long. Once inside, Trixie took them both by the hoof and dragged them over to a wall on which a beautiful stylized mural had been painted.
Regardez! Look!
Trixie said, jabbing a hoof at the painting.
It's the story of, well, I don't want to say her name in polite company. Heartstrings, but you know.
Lyra blinked, inspecting the mural. Well done in a gentle storybook quality, and ending with Luna standing triumphant, sun and moon balanced on either wing, the mural clearly depicted the story of the fall of Celestia, the former alicorn princess and Luna's elder sister, and her transformation into the fiery, wrathful, and greedy mare known as Corona, followed by the epic battle between Luna and Corona for the fate of Equestria. It featured Luna's victory prominently, but Lyra nevertheless felt a shiver go down her spine at the sight, even in storybook fashion, of the alicorn that to this day was trapped inside the sun. Trixie nodded as Lyra looked over the mural, a wide grin on her features.
Story of Corona,
she said, apparently forgetting her earlier concern.
Oui. Something like this is in every royal appointment in Equestria, mon ami. Reminds us to do our jobs and such.
Trixie drained one of the glasses she held, then turned to Lyra and Bonbon.
Do you know what Corona said just before Princess Luna trapped her in the sun?
She put a hoof to her chest, as though stabbed.
Ah!
The unicorn laughed at her joke and drained her second glass, but quickly noticed the mortified looks on the faces of Lyra and Bonbon.
Ne me regardez pas comme ça,
she exclaimed, stomping forward and jabbing a hoof slightly to Lyra's left.
C'est un boom! Y'all are supposed to enjoy yourselves!
Lyra stared, having a very, very difficult time reconciling the pony in front of her, who was draining her final glass, with the pony she had left earlier in the day.
Are you all right?
She asked. Trixie glared at Lyra before her gaze softened noticeably, and she stumbled forward, tapping Lyra on the nose.
You know, she said, you are very cute for a musician. Or because y'all are a musician, whatever.
Lyra responded.
She's taken,
Bonbon said quickly, stepping forward defensively between Trixie and Lyra. Trixie regarded her and beamed.
Ne vous inquiétez pas, you're very cute too.
She stumbled backwards a little as Pinkie Pie arrived and refilled her drinks. Trixie looked to the pink earth pony and smiled widely.
And Pinkie Pie, you're cute too in an annoying sort of way.
Thanks, the earth pony exclaimed. Trixie laughed.
Every pony's cute,
she exclaimed as she began walking/stumbling towards the nearest table and climbing it.
Every pony's cute, even I'm cute, no?
Trixie stood atop the table, rearing up on her hind legs and throwing her forelegs wide, telekinesis seizing her cape and causing it to billow as though in a strong wind.
But in purple, I'm stunning.
With that, the unicorn collapsed, falling from the table and onto the floor, grin never leaving her face. Her eyes were closed, and she was still breathing, so Lyra assumed she was alive and mostly unharmed. Pinkie Pie smiled widely at the sight.
She is becoming one with her inner self, the party pony exclaimed. She passed out,
Bonbon remarked. Pinkie Pie nodded at her fellow earth pony.
That too.